I used to think I was street smart, not in a tough city survivor kind of way, but practical. I grew up in Houston with a single mom who worked 2 jobs and never locked the front door until I was home. She taught me early how to trust my gut, how to watch for the weird ones, and to always keep my keys between my fingers when walking at night. I carried that mindset into adulthood, or so I thought. When I hit 28, something inside me cracked. I had just walked away from a toxic relationship, the kind where you don't even realize how off balance you've become until you're halfway out the door with a duffel bag and nowhere to land. I wasn't ready to settle. I didn't want to anchor myself to any one place. So I left. Rented out my car on an app. Lived out of a suitcase. Did house-sitting gigs and small commissions for pet portraits and home illustrations. The freedom felt therapeutic. By the time I found the listing for the week-long house sit near Vancouver, Washington, I'd been on the road 8 months. It looked peaceful. Just a cozy cabin surrounded by tall fir trees and early winter fog. A dog named Apple. Good pay, no kids, no couples, no distractions. The cabin was perched at the end of a dirt road that wound around a cluster of rental homes. You could barely see your neighbor through the trees, and it felt like you were the last person on Earth when the sun went down. I liked it. Isolation had become a strange kind of comfort for me. The second night there, around 10:30 p.m., I realized I was out of snacks. Typical. I figured I'd make a quick trip to the 7-Eleven on Anderson Ard. It was the only place open late. I drove there barefoot in slippers, hoodie on, just grabbing chips, some chocolate, and a cold coffee. Inside, the place was dead except for the cashier, a guy who looked like he'd pulled one too many graveyard shifts. The lights above buzzed like they were trying to die. That's when he walked in. He wasn't old or young, just nondescript. Hood up, jeans soaked from the rain, shoes leaving wet prints on the tile. I didn't see a car outside. No umbrella. He didn't grab a drink or go for the shelves. Just walked the aisles slowly, like he wasn't looking for anything but wanted to appear as if he was. I paid and left fast, brushing off the paranoia as leftover anxiety. But in the parking lot, I caught a glimpse of him through the glass. He hadn't gone up to the counter. He was still there, watching. The road back to the cabin was completely empty. Fog hung thick, swallowing the trees and bouncing my headlights back at me. I drove with the windows cracked just enough to keep from fogging up the windshield. My pulse was still elevated, but I kept telling myself it was nothing. Creepy guy in a store. Happens all the time. When I pulled into the driveway, Apple was at the front window, tail thumping. I felt instantly better. That dog was all golden retriever warmth, eager, gentle, and way too smart for his own good. We settled in. I tossed him a biscuit, kicked off my slippers, and cracked open my snacks. He stayed by the door, though. Not just lingering, pacing. Ears perked. I muted the TV and called him. He didn't come. Instead, he let out a low, throaty growl, not loud but deliberate. I got up and peered out the front window. Nothing. Still, my stomach twisted. I closed the curtains. Told myself it was a raccoon or a deer. Apple was adjusting, just like me. New place, new smells. An hour later, I was standing in the kitchen rearranging groceries in the fridge to make room for a soda when I heard it. Soft, deliberate. A knock, not from the front door, from the back window. It was one of those narrow windows near the laundry nook, covered with a cheap pull-down shade, thin enough to let through a sliver of light. I froze. The knock came again, just once this time. I didn't move. My phone buzzed. I picked it up, my hand suddenly clammy. One new message, no text, just an image. It was a photo of my Jeep, parked in the 7-Eleven lot, taken from behind as if someone had been watching. I didn't think. I locked the back door, every window, shut off all the lights. Apple stayed right by me, his body stiff and alert. The worst part was the silence. No yelling, no footsteps, just the buzz of the fridge and my own shallow breathing. Then Apple went still, head tilted toward the hallway closet, the one I hadn't checked since I arrived. I wanted to believe it was nothing. Maybe some drafty vent, a rat, something small that made noise and triggered the dog's instincts. But I could hear it too. Slow, controlled breathing, coming from inside the closet. I didn't speak, didn't scream. I just grabbed my keys and ran. Apple followed, ears flat, body low to the ground. I didn't even grab my coat. We ran barefoot into the fog. I slammed the Jeep into drive, tires spitting gravel, and didn't stop until I saw a lit sign. It wasn't a police station, but a firehouse. It was open. 2 firefighters were inside. I must have looked insane, shaking, barefoot, dog panting beside me. But they believed me, or at least they didn't hesitate. One called the cops. The other walked me inside, gave me water, let Apple curl up beside a radiator. When the sheriff arrived, they found pry marks on the kitchen window frame. Someone had tried to force it, then gave up. The shed out back was unlocked. Inside was a pile of cigarette butts, a half-empty bottle of water, and a torn sleeping bag. Someone had been living there, watching the house, maybe for days. I never went back to that cabin. I packed up my things the next morning, had a friend from Portland come with me. The police never found the guy. The store clerk at the 7-Eleven didn't even remember him. No cameras on that side of the store. What stuck with me the most wasn't the break-in. It was the picture. That moment. The knowledge that someone had been behind me, unseen, and close enough to take that photo without me knowing. I started replaying everything in my head. Had I seen the same car twice on the way back? Had I missed a shadow in the trees when I took Apple out that morning? I didn't want to know the answers. I left Washington the next day. I moved in with my sister in Dallas. She had a spare room, a fenced yard, and a Ring camera on every door. Apple stayed with me for a few months until his real owners returned. Letting him go was harder than I expected. I started therapy. It took time to feel safe again, to sleep without checking every lock twice or flinching at every bark. I don't take isolated gigs anymore. No more rural cabins or off-the-grid getaways. I still draw, mostly digital commissions now, nothing that requires me to travel. I keep a bat by the front door, and I don't go to convenience stores alone at night. Ever. It wasn't just that someone tried to get into the cabin, it was that I ignored my gut. That flicker of unease, that warning in Apple's behavior. I knew something was off, and I brushed it aside. Sometimes the world doesn't come at you loudly. It creeps. It waits. And your only protection is listening to your own fear before it turns into a lesson you won't walk away from. Trusting your instincts isn't paranoia. It's survival. You don't really pay attention to the small things when you've been behind the wheel for 14 hours straight. Signs blur. Time warps. All that matters is that final stop, a bed, and something greasy to eat so your stomach doesn't revolt in the morning. I just finished a long-haul move from Sacramento to Phoenix. It wasn't the kind of job I loved doing, but it paid enough, and I didn't have to talk to anyone if I didn't want to. Just me, the road, and whatever podcasts or late-night radio I could pick up. By the time I rolled into town, my back felt fused to the seat, and my eyes were dry like I'd been staring into sand. The cheap motel I'd booked off an app was somewhere near the industrial edge of the city, one of those flat, boxy places tucked between warehouses and gas stations. $73 a night, no continental breakfast, but the AC worked. I didn't need more than that. What I did need, though, was food. Real food. I hadn't eaten since a vending machine sandwich around Bakersfield. The only place nearby was a 7-Eleven off West McDowell, maybe a mile from the motel. I could see it glowing like a weird oasis under an orange streetlight. One other car sat in the lot. A dark red sedan parked sloppy across 2 spots, like whoever owned it didn't give a damn. Should have been the first red flag. I almost skipped it. Almost. But my stomach made the call for me. The first thing I noticed walking in was how quiet it was. Like too quiet. No music, no chatter. just the dull hum of refrigerators and flickering fluorescence overhead. I stood just inside the sliding doors, waiting to hear the usual bored clerk welcome me or ask if I needed anything. Nothing. I took a slow lap around the store. The shelves were mostly stocked, but something felt off. The burrito warmer was still lit, but there were only 2 left inside, shriveled and leaning like they'd been there too long. The slushy machine whirred low, one light blinking red. "Hello?" I called out. No answer. Not even a rustle in the back room. I waited another few seconds before heading toward the fridge for a bottle of water. That's when I heard the automatic doors hiss open behind me. I turned around, expecting another tired trucker, or maybe the clerk returning from a smoke break. But it wasn't that. It was a man. Tall, with long legs that moved like they were half asleep. Dusty black jeans, a heavy parka zipped to the chin despite the Phoenix heat. He walked slow. Too slow. His eyes never left mine. No nod, no words. Just watching. "Hey man," I said, trying to play it casual. "You work here or something?" Still nothing. Just that look. Calm, blank, intent. I turned back toward the counter, half hoping someone, anyone, would step out from the back. Instead, the lights overhead clicked off. Not all at once, one row at a time, from the back of the store to the front. Click, click, click. I was suddenly standing in a long tunnel of darkness, lit only by the pale blue light of the last fridge near the corner. When I turned again, the man was no longer in the aisle. He was behind the counter. I should have run right then. But I didn't. I froze. Not because I was afraid, at least not in the traditional sense, but because it made no sense. I hadn't heard footsteps, no shuffling, no sound at all. Just 1 second he was standing near the burritos, and the next, he was behind the counter like he'd been there all along. He didn't move, didn't speak, just stared. Something in my gut screamed. That old instinct, buried under years of trying to pretend nothing scares me. I stepped backward, slow, like any sudden motion might make things worse. "I'm gonna head out," I said, almost a whisper. Didn't mean to bother anyone. I turned toward the doors. They opened with that mechanical hiss, and the hot desert air smacked me in the face. I stepped through and stopped cold. He was standing by my truck, outside. He wasn't behind the counter anymore. He was leaning near the passenger door, hands in his coat pockets like we were about to carpool. My pulse went ballistic. "How the hell?" I started, but he cut me off. "Mind giving me a ride? Just down the road." His voice was quiet, level. No threat, no aggression. Just calm. But it wasn't a question. It was a statement wrapped in politeness. I swallowed. "Sorry, I'm out of gas." He tilted his head and smiled. Not big, not friendly, just knowing. "You were full when you got here." My throat went dry. I didn't remember him seeing me park. Didn't think anyone could see my tank. But I didn't argue. I got in the driver's seat, slammed the door, locked it, and turned the key. He didn't flinch, just stood there watching. Then, like divine timing, a pair of headlights broke over the far edge of the lot. A white security van, private patrol. The man stepped back, then walked, not ran, behind the building. Gone. I didn't sleep that night. I checked out of the motel at 3:01 a.m., drove halfway to Flagstaff, and parked at a truck stop just to feel surrounded by people again. The next day, I filed a report, told the local cops about what happened. They were polite, but tired. One officer offered to pull footage. I gave him the store address. He said it might take a couple of days. I told him I didn't expect much, just wanted to get it off my chest. 2 days later, he called. "I checked the tapes," he said. "You sure about what you saw?" "Yeah. Why?" "There's nothing. No guy. Not even a clerk. You're just in there, walking around, talking to yourself. Like you're looking for someone." That stopped me. "What about when I left?" The guy outside. Just you, man, leaving alone. I didn't know what to say. I wasn't hallucinating. I hadn't touched anything stronger than gas station coffee in weeks. But the way the man moved, the way he knew I was full on gas, that wasn't a dream. And yet, the camera disagreed. It's been 6 months. I haven't been back to Phoenix since. Don't plan to. I still drive long routes, but I stay on the interstates now. If I need food, I go through the drive-thru. I don't stop at places that glow too bright in empty lots. And I definitely don't stop at 7-Elevens after midnight. Sometimes I wonder if that man was ever real, or if he was only real to me. I've had friends joke say it sounds like some ghost story, that maybe the stress of the road got to me, but I wasn't scared because he was threatening. I was scared because he wasn't. The calmness, the smile, the way he stood in the wrong places at the wrong times like he was bending the world around him. That's what gets me. Not what he did, but how nothing made sense, and how my brain tried to explain it anyway. There are things you can't prove, things that don't care if you believe in them or not. But when you're tired, alone, and too desperate to think clearly, those are the cracks something uses to slide through. Not every danger looks like danger. Sometimes it speaks gently, smiles politely, and waits until you're too tired to listen to your gut. Trust that feeling. It's the only thing standing between you and the moment you can't take back. Long before I found myself sprinting through a 7-Eleven parking lot in Bakersfield with 2 masked men behind me, life had already started to grind me down. I was 20, living out of a 2-bedroom apartment I shared with my cousin Rosa on the south end of town. Second year at community college, majoring in psychology, trying to keep my head above water with classes during the day and shifts at my uncle's taco truck most nights. I wasn't doing anything heroic, just trying to get through it all in one piece. You know, survive, pay rent, finish school, maybe breathe once in a while. That week had been especially rough. 2 midterms back to back, one of my professors posted the wrong assignment file, and I hadn't slept more than 5 hours in 2 days. On top of it, Uncle Marco's truck generator gave out again, so we were behind all night, late orders, short tempers, and sore feet. It was close to 10:15 p.m. when we finally packed it in. My stomach was doing somersaults. Nothing was open nearby, and I couldn't bear the thought of cooking. That's how I ended up at the 7-Eleven on Union Ave. It wasn't my usual spot, but it was close to the taco truck and open late. The store sat alone near the railroad tracks just off the main drag. Chain-link fencing bordered one side of the parking lot, half covered in those ragged plastic bags that get stuck like ghosts. It had that yellowish flicker of old fluorescent lighting buzzing like a migraine. A rough place, sure, but I'd grown up around rough. That first night I just needed food and electrolytes. I barely noticed the white Chevy Malibu until I stepped out of my car. It was parked across the lot, engine running, windows fogged like someone was chain smoking inside, or the AC was maxed out. But nobody got out. I caught it in my peripheral vision as I walked in, the hum of the engine steady like background noise. Inside, I grabbed some instant noodles and a red sports drink, nodded at the cashier, a guy in his mid-30s wearing a Raiders cap and scrolling his phone behind the plexiglass. When I came back out, the car had moved. Not left. Moved. Now it was parked 2 rows closer, like it was casually drifting toward the front of the store. Still no one got out. The windows were too fogged to make out faces, but I felt eyes. You know that crawling sensation at the base of your neck? That. I told myself I was overthinking it. People sleep in their cars around here, I reminded myself. It's Bakersfield. Weird stuff happens all the time. I left, drove home, didn't even tell Rosa. But that night something stuck. The foggy windows, the idle engine, the way it didn't leave, just adjusted, like it wanted a better view. And I ignored it. The next night played out almost exactly the same. Another late shift, more complaints, more grease on my clothes than food in my stomach. Around 10:10 I pulled into the same 7-Eleven lot, craving something warm and salty. The white Chevy Malibu was already there. This time it was parked closer to the curb near the dumpsters, but the engine was still running. Same fogged up windows. It looked like the exact same scene replayed from the night before, except this time, I looked straight through the windshield. There was someone in the driver's seat. I couldn't make out a full face through the haze, but I caught the faint shape of a head turning toward me, and staying there, watching. I stood frozen for a second before stepping toward the store. Inside, I found the same cashier, still behind the counter, still glued to his phone. "Hey," I said, trying to sound casual. "Same weird foggy windows. Kinda creepy, right?" "That car's been out there 2 nights in a row. Same spot." He glanced up at me without much interest. Flatly. "Nothing new." "People sleep in their cars around here," he said. I wanted to ask more, like how long he'd worked there, if he'd seen anything sketchy, but something in his disinterest made me drop it. I grabbed another cup of noodles, a bag of chips, paid in cash, and walked out quickly. As I stepped outside, I peeked again at the Malibu. Still there, still idling. But I didn't see the figure this time. The windshield was just a blur of condensation and streetlight glare. I walked fast to my car, keys clutched tight between my fingers like makeshift brass knuckles, and got inside. I locked the doors before I even put the key in the ignition. When I pulled away, I checked the rearview mirror twice. The Chevy never moved, but I couldn't shake the feeling it wasn't finished. By the third night, I almost convinced myself not to stop. I could microwave something sketchy at home, or just sleep hungry. But I was exhausted, mentally and physically, and it was so easy to rationalize away fear when you're starving and tired. When I turned into the 7-Eleven lot, I spotted the car before anything else. It was parked in the opposite corner this time. The second I pulled in, its headlights blinked. Once, just a flash, a signal. My throat went dry. I didn't even look over. I parked fast and rushed inside. Same clerk, same lazy vibe. He didn't even look up this time. I rushed my choices, 2 frozen burritos and an energy drink, and headed for the counter. I paid, grabbed my stuff, and turned to leave. That's when I noticed it. The Chevy was now behind my car. My heart jumped into my throat. There was no way I'd mistake it. It had moved while I was inside. I pushed through the door, eyes scanning the lot, trying not to look panicked. As I walked toward my car, I heard the unmistakable click of a door opening, then another. 2 masked men jumped out of the Chevy's passenger side, one tall and wiry, the other heavier, moving faster than he should have been. Both in black hoodies, faces covered, running straight at me. I didn't think so. I screamed. Loud. I threw my bag behind me and bolted toward the side of the building. My sneaker caught on the curb and I nearly face planted. I scrambled up, elbow scraping across the pavement. "Hey!" a gravelly voice shouted from the shadows. A man, homeless probably, bundled in layers and huddled behind a dumpster. He jumped to his feet, yelling and flailing his arms. The attackers stopped, just for a second. That's all it took. They spun around, sprinted back to the Chevy, and peeled out of the lot with tires screeching. I was left gasping, shaking, and bleeding, but alive. The police arrived 15 minutes later. I sat on the curb, a burrito bag forgotten somewhere on the pavement, arm wrapped in an old hoodie the homeless man gave me. His name was Freddie. I'll never forget that. The officers asked the usual questions. I answered everything I could, but it wasn't much. I didn't catch the plate number. I couldn't tell them if the attackers were armed. The faces were completely covered. "Store have cameras?" one officer asked. The clerk shook his head. "They've been busted for a couple months now. Corporate's slow." Freddie told the cops he'd seen the car around before, but never with anyone getting out. They thanked him, took my statement, and promised to increase patrols in the area. None of it made me feel better. Rosa begged me not to go back. I didn't argue. I started carrying pepper spray everywhere, changed my routes home, took a break from night shifts for a few weeks. My uncle understood. The adrenaline wore off, but the fear didn't. For months, I flinched every time I saw a white sedan. I started checking my mirrors constantly, convinced someone was following me. I knew how close I'd come to becoming another name in a headline. And the worst part? I'd seen the signs. The memory never left. Even a year later, every time I drove past Union Ave, I'd get that tightness in my chest. I'd turn my music down, glance at every parked car twice, and I kept asking myself, what if Freddy hadn't been there? What if they had a weapon? I learned that survival isn't always about strength. Sometimes it's about noticing, recognizing when your gut is telling you something's wrong and not brushing it off because you're tired or hungry or used to the weirdness. I started writing about what happened, not for a grade or a class, but for me. I started taking self-defense classes too, just knowing how to yell no properly, how to aim pepper spray, where to hit if you ever need to. That helped. I talked to other women too. Turns out a lot of us have these kinds of stories. Near misses. Stalkers. Cars that circle back around the block too many times. It's a constant, quiet threat that people tell us to ignore. But we shouldn't. Looking back, I don't hate the 7-Eleven. It was just a place. What scared me was how easy it was to rationalize danger, to think I was being paranoid, and how easy it was for someone to plan something terrible while the rest of the world kept spinning. Trust your instincts. Your gut isn't just paranoia. It's experience, memory, and survival built into you. When something feels wrong, believe it. Protect yourself. Speak up. You don't owe politeness to danger. There's a type of fear that doesn't arrive with loud footsteps or screaming sirens. It shows up quiet, slow, disguised as coincidence. It creeps. That's what I learned one Tuesday afternoon in Brooklyn, just past lunchtime. I was 31, a marketing assistant at a small publishing house off Flatbush. It was a decent job. Steady hours, decent pay, health insurance that didn't totally suck. I lived in a second-floor walk-up on East 29th, spent more money than I should on oat milk lattes, and owned too many dresses that looked like I'd borrowed them from a romantic comedy extra. Life was fine, not amazing, but stable. That Tuesday was packed with Zoom meetings, tight deadlines, and a coworker who kept using synergy like it meant something. Around 1:15, I finally stepped out for air and something cold to drink. The 7-Eleven on Flatbush and Avenue H was 3 blocks from the office, and I'd been there 100 times before. Nothing special about it. Just bright lights, scuffed tile floors, that sour-sweet scent of Slurpee syrup and overbaked pizza. I walked in, browsed quickly, grabbed a Sprite and a pack of gum, and got in line behind a guy wearing dusty boots. I was scrolling my phone when it buzzed, an unknown number calling. I declined it without hesitation. Probably spam. I didn't think anything of it until maybe 30 seconds later, a message popped up. Cute white blouse. The green purse doesn't match though. At first I laughed a little, confused. Then my brain did the math. I was wearing a white blouse, a button down, slightly sheer with loose cuffs. My purse was a green canvas crossbody I'd picked up from a thrift store last winter. Not something anyone could guess. Not a generic white top and jeans sort of thing. I turned around slowly. The store was full. At least 10 people behind me. A mom with a kid in a stroller, a man in a hard hat, 2 teenagers arguing over Doritos, a student still wearing his backpack. No one was looking at me. Then came the second message. Don't worry, I'm not behind you anymore. My heart dropped. That's when I knew this wasn't random. I dropped my soda on the floor, didn't even hear it bounce, and walked straight out the store like I suddenly remembered an appointment. My hands were shaking. Outside, the street was busy. Brooklyn always is. Cars honked, someone shouted into their phone, a bus hissed as it pulled away. I blended into the noise, pretending to be on a call. I didn't check my phone until I reached the corner. Another message. Why'd you stop wearing that rose necklace? I like that. That did it. My rose necklace wasn't something I ever posted about. It had belonged to my mom, a silver chain with a small charm, worn more for sentiment than style. I hadn't worn it in weeks, not since I misplaced it doing laundry. Whoever this was, they knew me. Not just now, not just today. They'd been watching me. Back at the office, I sat in a bathroom stall for nearly 20 minutes staring at the messages, I kept the sound off, afraid my coworkers might hear the buzz. I tried to think rationally. Maybe it was someone I knew from a dating app, someone from work being an absolute creep. But none of it made sense. The texts weren't flirty or aggressive, they were calm, observant, personal. I eventually went to HR, sat across from Marissa, the senior manager who handled complaints and benefits. I showed her the texts, explained what happened at the store. She blinked. That is unsettling. But it could be a scam, Chloe. Some robocallers use software that spoofs your location. Try not to panic. Block the number and keep your eyes open. Let us know if anything escalates. I left feeling like I'd overreacted, but it didn't feel like spam. It felt like a whisper directly in my ear. That night, I didn't go home right away. I took the long way back, changed trains, stopped at a Walgreens in Park Slope even though I didn't need anything. My eyes scanned every face. I tried to look casual like someone just out for a walk, but my heart raced with every reflection I passed. At home, I texted my sister. I didn't send her the messages, just said someone was creeping me out and I was staying alert. She offered to call, but I said I was fine. I wasn't. I barely slept. The next few days, the texts kept coming. One said, "Peanut butter granola again? You're a creature of habit." Another, "That book looks heavy. You're almost done, though." That one stopped me cold. I'd been reading The Goldfinch on the Q train that morning, the dust jacket worn from weeks of commuting. No one at work knew. It wasn't on my desk, and I hadn't posted it anywhere. I went to the police station that Saturday, told them everything. The texts, the specific comments, the 7-Eleven incident. The officer behind the desk took my report, but didn't even write anything down until I asked. "Look," he said, "unless this person threatens you or shows up at your home or job, there's not much we can do. Block the number, document everything, change your social media settings." It was like watching a storm form while everyone around you shrugs at a cloud. I left with a pamphlet on cyberstalking and a phone number to a support line. No follow-up, no patrol, nothing. I changed my routine, stopped going to that 7-Eleven, took different streets to work, deleted every non-professional photo off Instagram, locked down my Facebook, made my LinkedIn private, but the texts adapted. New route today, smart. Nice boots. The heel's worn down on the right, by the way. Your umbrella's in the front pocket, don't forget it this time. I told myself I'd move, that this would pass, but fear has a way of making you small. It shrinks your world. I started canceling plans, declining invites. I even skipped my niece's birthday party because I couldn't face the thought of someone following me across boroughs. My manager noticed something was off. Been kind of out of it. "Everything okay?" she asked one morning. I told her I was having a rough week. She nodded sympathetically and gave me a deadline extension. I didn't tell her the truth. I didn't want to sound crazy. I started to dread my phone, the buzz, the glow of the screen. I'd flinch every time it lit up. My world narrowed to 5 city blocks and my office cubicle. Every man I passed on the sidewalk could be him. Every cough behind me on the train was a signal. Every silence was loud. The worst part wasn't that I was afraid. The worst part was how normal it had become. 2 months later, I moved, found a studio on the other side of Prospect Park. Small, overpriced, but it had new locks and a second-floor view of trees. The first night I slept there, I didn't dream. The text stopped. I never got closure, never learned who it was. The number was eventually disconnected or maybe changed. I'd report each message, save screenshots, but nothing ever came of it. I stopped checking the news obsessively for similar cases. I stopped Googling my own name. I stopped expecting anything at all, but I never stopped looking over my shoulder. I don't go to that 7-Eleven anymore. I don't even like to walk that part of Flatbush. If I absolutely have to go into a convenience store, I check the reflections, the ceiling, the corners. Not because I think he's there, because I never knew who he was in the first place. And that's what haunts me. Years have passed. I've changed jobs. I'm in a different borough now. I've got better locks, a roommate who keeps pepper spray in her bag, and I've learned to trust my gut more than I ever did in my 20s. But some things stick with you. The green purse? I donated it. The rose necklace? I found it at the back of a drawer. I still haven't worn it again. I still check behind me when I walk alone. I still avoid answering unknown numbers. I still sometimes wonder if I passed him on the street today or yesterday, or if I'll ever know for sure. I think people expect a story like this to have a satisfying ending, a reveal, an arrest, a face to match the threat. But life's not a crime drama. Sometimes the scariest stories are the ones that never resolve. Not all danger shouts, some of it whispers. Always trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Speak up, push harder, ask for help twice if you must, because staying silent doesn't make it go away. And fear that creeps quietly is still fear, maybe the most dangerous kind of all. Long before the first whisper of midnight ever drifted across the Wichita truck stop, I was already awake, pacing around my one-bedroom apartment that smelled like stale coffee and regret. I'm Ryan, 26, and I'd been working overnight at the 7-Eleven on Seneca Street for nearly 6 months. Social anxiety had boxed me in more ways than one. Day jobs with people always around felt like a trap. Overnight shifts, though, quiet, predictable, almost peaceful. That's why I took the job. To distract myself with the hum of the fluorescent lights and the distant rumble of 18-wheelers. The 7-Eleven sits just on the edge of a long-haul truck stop. A line of diesel trucks idling all night, their drivers emerging for coffee, chips, or a slushy fix. During my first weeks, I learned every regular. Tom, the grizzled Texan who always bought 2 Red Bulls and paid cash. Maria, the nurse on the graveyard shift. The occasional college kid stumbling in with hoodie up, eyes glazed. Mostly it was calm. This particular Monday night, or early Tuesday morning, I clocked in at midnight, fed the register, straightened the chips, wiped down the coffee station, and settled into the monotony. I wore sweatpants, leftover from my last delivery shift, and a hoodie I bolted into like a security blanket. The store was clean, but weary. Scuffed floors, flickering fluorescence in aisle 6, the nostalgia-slanted smell of motor oil and canned beef stew. At about 3:12 in the morning, I was stacking cans of tuna when I noticed something odd. The back exit door, the one we never used except for deliveries, was cracked open. Just a sliver. Every protocol drill we'd done taught me to shut it immediately and write it up. But there was something holding me back. A hesitation. My heart thumped because we were locked down tight at night. No deliveries, no shipments. That door should have been sealed by the night crew. Muddy footprints trailed inside, small but aged, dried caked mud that hadn't been there hours ago. I froze, stacked tuna in midair. The logical part of my brain said, someone must have come in earlier. But no gunshots, no yelling, no thermal alarms. I shut the door and locked it again. Then I glanced up at the security monitor behind the counter. The external cameras, covering front, side, and back, were frozen on a grainy frame time-stamped 12:48 a.m. We'd had issues before. I opened the monitor app, fiddled with connections lines, and made a note. Report to manager. No answer. She must have been asleep. I gripped the counter edge and took 3 long breaths. The consoling hum of the night shift felt different now, too still. By 3:15 a.m., I forced myself to restock the creamer fridge, to do anything but think about that broken camera feed or the footprints. The store phone cradled between my elbow and hip, just in case. Then it happened. A plastic bottle clinked as it hit the floor behind aisle 6. My head snapped. "Hey," I called, voice barely above a whisper. I patted down the aisle. The bottle, a dish soap, lay on its side like someone nudged it off a shelf. I looked over my shoulder. Empty aisles, scuffed linoleum, stale red Tag R signs. That's when I noticed a faint X scratched into the dust on the adjacent shelf. Tiny, subtle, but deliberate. A signal, a mark left by someone. My stomach flipped. I picked up the bottle, heart pounding loud enough I could taste it. I backed into the store's front area, pressed the bottle under the counter, and tried to steady my breath. Everything felt too cold. All the walls, the ceiling, even the air smelled wrong. I told myself no one was in the store. Locked doors, front door with sensor alarm, back door sealed. The engine room, utility closet, all locked. And yet, I couldn't shake the feeling someone was somewhere I didn't know about. I returned to the counter and wiped my hands on my hoodie. My phone hadn't rung with my manager's number, but I'd tried. I just stared at the door that led to the utility closet and stared. The knock came at 3:22 a.m. I nearly jumped out of my skin. It sounded like a quiet knock on metal. Rap from inside the store. Not the front door. Not the back exit. The glass pane locked tight. It was the utility closet. I stared for a second, dumbfounded. Then I steadied my voice. Hello? Who's there? Silence. Shaking, I placed one foot in front of the other and crept toward the closet door. The knock came again. Rap, almost like impatience. Hey, I said louder. If you're in there, come out slowly. No answer. My throat went dry. My shaky hand reached for the door handle, metal cold, and I yanked it open, empty. Cleaning supplies, mops, buckets, industrial soap, and, impossibly, a wooden chair facing the wall, one I hadn't seen earlier. The chair looked like it was left mid-thought, like someone had been sitting there simple and alone. I stared. There was no possible reason for it to be there. I could feel breath ghost across my face. I dashed back to the counter, slammed the door shut, and locked it with shaking fingers. My phone buzzed. It was my manager, finally, asking, "Everything okay?" I think someone was in the utility room. I typed, "Chair was in there. No one else here." Back door was open earlier. Footprints. I heard her breathing on the other end. Could feel goosebumps form. She said she'd get to the store in 30 minutes and I should call police if I felt unsafe. I nodded. She probably thought I was paranoid. I didn't care. At dawn, fuzzy-edged police lights reflected through the sale signs on the glass. The officers stepped inside, voices soft. I walked them through the store, back door locked, monitor feed repaired magically, utility closet locked at that moment. They opened it. That chair was still there. Nobody else. They checked records. No break-in reported, no missing merchandise. Cameras were now working, time-stamped, crisp, no glitches. Sign of squatters before, one officer said quietly, but no active break-ins. We'll patrol more. I packed up, handed over my keys, and closed the door behind me. The sign read closed, but I was closing much more than a store. I quit that week. I called my coworker, Sarah, who used to work the graveyard there a couple years back. She spilled a local legend. A homeless man used to sneak into the back room during brutal winter nights. He'd sleep in the utility closet for warmth. One cold November morning, he froze to death there. Nobody found him until after my shift. 2 nights passed. They replaced the chair weeks ago. That seat, they said, might have still been there, crowded in with supplies unremarked. But the footprints, the X in dust, the locked door, the knock from inside. I still wake up in the middle of the night sometimes, staring at the ceiling, thinking back to that wooden chair facing the wall, wondering if someone was in the store, watching, or if my mind played a trick, if the emptiness was enough. Either way, the store sits there still, humid nights, solitary hours, waiting. Even in silence, presence matters. Trust what unsettles you. Some doors aren't locked by keys, they're secured by awareness. When something's out of place, speak up, because the most overlooked spaces can hide the deepest truths. I never pictured myself working the overnight shift at a convenience store, but on that spring Friday I agreed to cover for a coworker who'd called out. I was Ben, 22, college student, weekend bartender. The 7-Eleven on South 5th Street in Louisville was small and quiet, tucked on the edge of downtown. Traffic thinned after midnight, and I figured I'd pass the time with podcasts and restocking shelves. At 1:30 a.m., business slowed to a trickle. 2 tipsy college girls came in, grabbed beer and chips, giggling at my tired yawns. Then another guy in sweats, bleary-eyed, whispered, "Water," and left. By 2, the air was thick with the hum of the freezer and the steady squeak of the ceiling fan turning every few rotations. Peaceful, almost sleep-inducing. I leaned over the counter, browsing my phone, when the bell over the door chimed at 2:40 a.m. I looked up to see a man step in, heavy hoodie drawn up, gloves on even though the window said 65 degrees outside. He didn't approach the counter or speak, just melted into the aisles, pacing slowly past chips, candy, energy bars. Every few steps, he glanced up at the dome mirror hanging from the ceiling before looking down. It wasn't a glance of concern, it felt intentional. I greeted him. "Evening, sir. Can I help you with something?" He continued pacing. No glance, no nod, no response. My heart started tapping an uneven rhythm. I forced a smile and turned back to my phone, pretending not to watch. But even through the earphones in my pocket, I heard the soft shuffling of his shoes, back and forth, like a ghost patrolling. 5 minutes passed. He left the same way he came. No purchase. I exhaled a long breath I didn't know I'd been holding. I tried to calm my racing heart. No alarms, no flashing lights. I checked the time. 3:05 a.m. Maybe it was just someone doing a mental breakdown or scouting. I shook off the thought. Store managers lectured us about procedure, not mental health. I moved toward the back door to take out the trash, abiding by protocol and locking the front door behind me. The evening breeze hit me heavy as I staggered through empty parking lot, wheeling the bin to the dumpster. Behind me, the store's automatic lock clicked on. When I returned, I tried the door. It wouldn't open. The front latch jammed. I twisted more forcefully and shoved through. Inside, nothing was out of place. Shelves intact, cash register where I left it, coffee station prim and polished. Just me again, alone with that echo of steps. I told myself I was overthinking. It was a random guy looking for shelter from the wind. I closed and locked the back door again and returned to reorganize snack racks. But the apartment-sized quiet felt uneasy now. By 3:30, I was busy restocking the cooler and straightening sirens of energy drinks. I kept glancing at the mirror, every reflection making me shiver. At around 3:40, I heard it. A soft thud behind the stacked crates near the back cooler. Crate tops thumping like an empty box nudged. My heart froze. I hovered, waiting for the echo. Nothing. Silence. "Hello?" I called softly. No answer. I slowly edged toward the crates, trying to peer around like someone playing hide and seek. My phone burned in my pocket. I barely remembered the number to call 911 in my head. Then I saw it, a dark shape retreating through the storage room door by the cooler, the door that led into a narrow hallway used only for inventory and staff. I froze. The shadow vanished behind that door. My pounding veins felt like hammers. Shaking, I backed away, eyes locked on the cooler door. My hands couldn't settle enough to lock the crate back. I bolted to the supply closet tucked near the restroom, locked it behind me, nearly slamming the door in shock. I leaned against it, phone in my hand, breathing so fast I could feel the heat in my chest. 911, what's your emergency? The operator's calm voice came through after the beep. There's someone. I heard a noise. I think they were in the back storage or freezer. I managed, voice trembling. I could taste the fear, ripe and bitter. Are you safe inside? She asked. I nodded, realizing she couldn't see me. Restrooms. Yes. I'm locked in the supply closet near an officer is on the way. Can you stay hidden? Yes, I whispered. My phone lit faces cracking plaster behind the door. The freezer's hum vibrated the wall. What felt like eternity later, but was more like 5 minutes. I heard sirens approach, then the officer's radio calls. A key turned in the locker. The door creaked open. 2 officers stood there, flashlights sweeping shelves. I led them back through the store. In the cooler hallway, there were muddy footprints on the floor, leading from inside the cooler door to the loading area. The cooler door had a dent near the latch like someone forced it. My stomach sank. The man must have entered through the cooler or the back door earlier. They searched every corner, under racks, behind crates in the restroom, and found no one. No stolen items, no weapon, just the footprints and that dent. They thanked me for calling and said they'd increase patrols. But after they left, the store was empty again. Silent. I was trembling. Adrenaline drained into hollow emptiness. I couldn't stay. I couldn't restock like this, retracing someone else's steps in my head. I quit that night. I took out my final register shift, handed in the keys, and stepped into early morning sunlight that felt like salvation. My skin burned from tension. I spent the next few weeks spiraling between rage and guilt. A dozen nights of sleep plagued my dreams. Sealed inside a small room, footsteps echoing just beyond the door. I avoided stores at night. I got a pepper spray keychain and practiced steps a local self-defense class taught me. My college campus security escorted me across empty parking lots. I knew my fear was grounded, but eventually I wanted answers. I talked to other overnight workers in the neighborhood. All of them had experienced silent intrusions. No robberies, no demands, just someone entering, pacing, possibly watching, then leaving. Nothing stolen. Shelves slightly moved. The pattern repeated across 3 different 7-Elevens in less than a month. There was no face, no description beyond that hood and gloves. The man wore no bag, nothing to carry loot. Maybe he wasn't there to steal. Maybe he was there to test the edges of their lives, to terrify with presence alone. The store's security footage, front camera, caught a blurry figure pacing near the candy aisle at 2:40 a.m. But the quality was poor. No license plate, no hair, no eyes. A shape. I kept the screenshot. I looked at it when panic hit, but it didn't help. I stopped working overnights forever. I shifted my classes and bartending shifts to mornings and afternoons, but nights still felt unsafe. My mind replayed that shape, that mirrored glance. Months later, I returned to Louisville for a friend's birthday. I agreed to meet at a late-night cafe just off 5th Street because it'll be fine, it's broad daylight. I followed the bus route past the 7-Eleven. The bell jingled as I passed. I paused. Reflection in the glass. Me, hoodie, fresh scars beneath my collar. I couldn't step inside. I exhaled. I moved on. I thought about the man. Who he was, what he wanted, if he ever watched again. It didn't matter what he wanted. What mattered was how he'd used emptiness as a weapon. He didn't need a weapon. He just needed the silence, my fear and time. I never saw him again. No arrests, no repeat intruder caught. Just me, carrying the story. I don't forget easy what's meant to be forgotten. But I learned something important. You don't have to face fear to destroy it. You just have to step away from it. I changed shifts. I recognized panic isn't weakness, it's a warning. I started writing about it, blog posts on safety measures at convenience stores, daytime retail jobs, how protocols matter. I spoke at a local association for small retail owners about better cameras, silent alarms, employee check-in apps. But mostly I learned boundaries, that some jobs push you to extremes that aren't worth it, that we undervalue the overnight workers, the ones holding the lights on while the city sleeps, and that sometimes intimidation doesn't come from fists or guns. It comes from the suggestion of someone being there, just being there. Fear isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the quietest footsteps in the darkest aisle. Trust your instincts, even in places that seem benign, and act on them immediately. It's not about being brave. It's about protecting yourself from a danger no one else might even see. They say you never really know someone until you try to leave them. I met Raina during a low point. It was a December night, cold for Fresno, and I had just gotten off a brutal closing shift at the tire shop. I was tired, frustrated, and feeling like a ghost walking through my own life. I stopped by a dive bar off Belmont, the kind of place with bad lighting, worse jukebox selections, and exactly the kind of anonymity I craved that night. Raina was working the bar, all smoky eyeliner and fast comebacks. She had this way of locking onto people with her eyes, like she could see exactly what kind of mess you were hiding under your sweatshirt. She smiled, poured me a whiskey I didn't ask for, and told me, "You look like someone who needs the strong stuff." I stayed until last call. The next 6 months were a blur. Laughter, fights, late-night drives with no destination, the kind of connection that feels like a drug. She was magnetic, unpredictable, intoxicating. She also had a temper like a matchbook and used guilt like a blade. The highs were high, the lows were nuclear. Every argument ended with her crying just enough, saying just the right thing to reel me back in. I let it go on longer than I should have. I always told myself the good moments made up for the rest. They didn't. When I finally blocked her, after a screaming match over something stupid, followed by 3 days of radio silence, then her threatening to vanish forever if I didn't care enough to chase her, it felt like I was digging myself out of a shallow grave. My mind felt clearer. My apartment, for once, was silent and still. Then, 3 weeks later, the text came. "I left something important with you. Just 10 minutes. Meet at the 7-Eleven on Blackstone." No name, no emoji, just those words. It sounded like her. She'd used burner numbers before, back when she'd test me to see if I'd respond to random messages. Always a game, always control. I stared at the message for a full 5 minutes. Then I typed out, "What did you leave?" No answer. I waited. Nothing. I told myself I wouldn't go, that I'd moved past all that. But a part of me, the stupid leftover part that hadn't yet learned to stop opening old wounds, needed to know. If she really left something, I could hand it off and finally be done. I told myself I'd stay in the car, keep it transactional, in and out, nothing more. That was my first mistake. The 7-Eleven on Blackstone isn't the worst part of town, but it's not where you'd go if you had better options. It sits on the edge of a semi-vacant stretch, surrounded by empty lots, a boarded-up vape shop, and a payday loan place with flickering neon signs. Most nights it's quiet, more shadows than people. I pulled into the parking lot just before 9:45. The place was dim, half the overhead lights were out, and nearly empty. A man in a trucker hat stood outside smoking a cigarette, staring at nothing. His face was gray in the dull glow of the building. Across the lot, I noticed a dark sedan idling, lights off, engine humming. I stayed in my car and scanned the lot. Nothing looked urgent, no sign of Raina, no frantic knocking on the window, no dramatic approach with tears in her eyes. Then my phone buzzed. "Don't stay in the car. Come inside. I'm by the drinks." My breath hitched. The message came from the same number. There was no typing delay. It came quick, like they knew I'd parked. I turned my headlights off and sat there weighing the options. It could have been innocent, or it could be exactly the kind of manipulative power play she'd used before. Still, I told myself, again, 10 minutes. Get the item, leave. I stepped inside. The place was strangely quiet. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead. The floor buzzed under my boots. No one was at the counter. "Hello?" I called out. No answer. The drink coolers were along the back wall. I walked slowly, my footsteps sharp in the silence. I passed the candy aisle, then paused at the corner where the drinks were. No one. Just rows of Gatorade, Red Bull, sodas. I scanned the whole aisle. Nothing. I turned to leave and that's when I saw movement. From the far side of the store, someone stepped out from the candy aisle. A man. Tall, wearing a ski mask. Not Raina. I froze. He didn't say anything. He just stood there, hands at his sides. My instincts screamed. I turned on my heel and ran, just as a second man entered through the front door behind me. I ducked behind the end cap of magazines, knocking over a shelf as I went. A cascade of snacks and energy bars spilled onto the floor. I didn't look back. I ran straight through the back door, the one marked employees only, and slammed into the night air as the door beeped in protest. I didn't stop. I didn't breathe. I didn't think. I just ran. Great. Let's continue the full story right where we left off. My lungs burned. My legs moved faster than they had in years. I didn't stop until I spotted a taco truck parked under a flickering streetlight, maybe a block and a half down from the 7-Eleven. The kind of spot that stayed open late for night shift workers or guys too drunk to cook. I sprinted toward it, practically throwing myself against the side, pounding on the aluminum siding like it owed me money. Hey, I need help, I yelled. A guy in a black apron slid open the window. He looked like he was about to tell me they were closed, but stopped when he saw my face. Yo, you okay, man? There's two guys, I panted. Back at the 7-Eleven, masks. They were waiting for someone. I think they were waiting for me. The guy shouted something in Spanish over his shoulder, and a second worker, a younger guy, appeared behind him. Get in, the first guy said, reaching for the door. Come on, you're not standing out here. They let me hunker down behind the fry station. The whole truck smelled like carne asada and grease, and I didn't care if I smelled like it for a week. I crouched on the floor, still shaking. One of them handed me a bottle of water. The other was already calling the police. I kept replaying it in my head. The text, the men, the empty store, the silence. It wasn't random. That wasn't some botched robbery or thrill-seeking punks. It felt planned. They were waiting. Not for the register, not for the store, for me. When the police showed up, lights flashing, questions already loaded, I told them everything. I showed them the text, gave them the number, described the men, the ski masks, the setup. One officer walked over to the store with a flashlight. Another stayed with me, asking if I had any enemies, if this could be a prank, or something domestic. That's when it clicked in my head. Raina, her old burner. I recognized the number. I'd seen it once when she used it to text me from a fake friend's phone to test if I'd cheat. I'd blocked that number too. I told the cop. He took a note. But it was clear he didn't quite believe me. The whole thing sounded too strange. They checked the store's security system next. The footage from 9Y to 10Y p.m. Gone. Just a blank, corrupted segment. Every other hour was fine, but the exact window when I arrived and the men showed up, wiped clean, like it never happened. That was when I saw the officer's face shift. He stopped asking if I had enemies, and started asking if anyone could have tampered with the footage. I didn't sleep that night, not even a little. I sat on my couch, lights on, baseball bat across my lap like I was prepping for a home invasion. I kept my phone on airplane mode and stared at it anyway, expecting another text to push through by magic. It never did. The next day, I drove past the 7-Eleven in broad daylight. I didn't get out. Just sat at the far end of the parking lot and watched the automatic doors open and close for strangers. Nothing looked different, not from the outside, but everything inside me had changed. I told myself I was over Raina, that I'd cut the cord, but there she was, still finding ways to manipulate, to play puppet master with my life. And this time it wasn't just emotions. It felt physical, dangerous. What scared me the most wasn't the masked guys. It wasn't even the idea that she'd sent them. It was that she knew. She knew I'd come. She knew I still had that thread of guilt, that buried instinct to fix things. She used my own patterns against me. I moved apartments a month later, found a place on the other side of town, closer to work, farther from old memories. I changed my number, started therapy. My therapist told me that leaving someone manipulative isn't a one-time decision. It's 100 little decisions made every single day. She was right. But one decision came easily. I stopped going to 7-Elevens. Period. Didn't matter where I was. Didn't matter if it was the only thing open for miles. I'd rather go hungry. It wasn't about the brand. It was the familiarity, the trust, that one little safe place you think will always be there. Raina knew it was mine, and she twisted it. It's been 3 years now. No more random texts, no more sightings, no more black sedans idling across dark lots. But sometimes, in the early hours of a sleepless night, I'll think about what might have happened if I hadn't run, if I'd hesitated, if I'd frozen instead of acted. Would they have hurt me, robbed me, taught me some lesson she thought I deserved? I don't know, and I don't want to. A friend of mine once said something that stuck with me. Toxic people don't want closure. They want access. That's exactly what Raina tried to take back that night. Access. Not just to me, to my decisions, my safety, my peace of mind. She didn't show up herself because she didn't need to. She'd already set the stage. She just needed me to walk into it. Now, I'm more careful. Not just with who I date, but with what I allow into my life. I look for patterns, I trust my gut. I value quiet. Peace isn't boring anymore, it's sacred. Sometimes I still drive late at night. Old habit, music low, streets empty. And every once in a while I'll pass a glowing 7-Eleven sign in the distance. I'll look away. Because safety is never a place. It's a boundary you don't let anyone cross. Never underestimate how far a manipulative person will go to keep control, especially when you finally choose to walk away. And never ignore the quiet part of you that says, "This doesn't feel right." That instinct might just save your life. I never expected working the 7-Eleven on Federal Boulevard to be anything more than a paycheck. My name's Maya, I'm 24, and I work evenings so I can save up for my vet tech certificate. I loved the routine, the bustling dinner rush followed by gentle quiet, the hum of the Slurpee machines, the faint smell of hot pizza and cooler air. My coworker Joel handled the late-night shift, so I had evenings to study before heading home. I thought it was safe. I thought it was normal. That Wednesday, busy usual, I clocked in at 6:15 p.m. I greeted the regulars, the construction guys grabbing energy drinks, students stocking up on snacks, the neighbor walking her dog. I rang them all up, made small talk about Denver weather and whether the Rockies might surprise this season. It felt good, normal. And then I noticed him. He was standing at the refrigerated drinks, back corner of the store, not choosing a drink or even holding one, just standing, watching. His posture was rigid, spine straight, arms at his sides. He didn't lean, didn't fidget, didn't blink. He just stared at me when I caught his gaze, then slipped his eyes away slowly. I scanned the rest of the store. No masks, no hoods, just his steady stare. I felt the familiar twinge of unease, but I shook it off. Maybe he was waiting for someone, or he zoned out. Customers did that. Customers had weird habits. I shrugged and continued my shift, glancing back every few minutes. He didn't move. Eventually, he left without buying anything. Later, working the register with Joel, I tried brushing it off. Weird guy in the back aisle tonight. He shrugged. Maybe he needed space. I nodded. But he didn't. The next evening, I tried not to notice him. I told myself it was overreaching, overreacting. But around 7, I looked up and there he was again. Same spot, this time pretending to browse gum at the end of the chips aisle. And once again, his eyes found mine. No smile, no frown, just that taut calm. Customers moved around us, no one noticing. But I did. I looked away quickly, swallowed. I focused on scanning Chick-fil-A minis and coffee cups as fast as I could. The guy's presence filled a corner of my awareness I couldn't set aside. "Do you know him?" I asked Joel quietly during a lull. He shook his head. Never seen him before. He lingered for 5 minutes, then left without a word or purchase. That night, my stomach felt hollow. My mind replayed those soulless eyes. I debated calling security, but I didn't want to sound overdramatic. My manager on duty didn't pick up the office phone. She was probably busy with clerks or reports. I shrugged and told myself I'd be fine. It's just routine. It's just work. But that night, the routine splintered. The following Wednesday night, I felt on edge from the moment I clocked in. Not because of work, because of him. Because when I opened the door, his car was parked out front, headlights off, engine quiet. He sat behind the wheel, staring at the store. I paused and took a breath. He didn't move. At 6:30, I walked back to grab stock, and someone on the other side of the drink cooler made a noise. I froze and realized it was him, stepping out toward the register. He picked up a single candy bar, scanned it slowly, and dropped bills on the counter. Then he looked at me and said, "You're always here. That's good. I like that." His tone was soft, almost friendly, but the stillness of his voice felt wrong. I forced a smile. "Thanks." My voice cracked. He turned and walked out without another word. My hands shook. Joel saw it when I grabbed restock boxes. He frowned when I told him. "Not normal," he said. "He's making it personal." I nodded, chest tight. I went home that night and couldn't sleep. The line, "You're always here," replayed. It sounded congratulatory or predatory. I realized then it wasn't a mistake, it was intentional. After that, it became a nightly routine. He appeared nearly every evening, sometimes buying something, sometimes not. Always watching, always waiting. I started noticing his car parked before I arrived. Sometimes after midnight, I'd step out and see headlights off in the lot. One night, I was closing alone. I locked the front door, flipped the closed sign, and walked to the back room to store cash. When I returned, I saw him at the edge of the parking lot, just standing there, silent, still. He didn't wave, he didn't move, he didn't walk. He watched. My heart slammed like a jackhammer. I told myself to stay calm, but my legs trembled. I finished sweeping and ran through the door to my car, fumbling with keys so fast I dropped them twice. I pulled away before he could react. I didn't dare look back. That night held me in my apartment for hours. I tiled resets and practiced worst-case scenarios. I emailed the district manager, wrote an incident report. She said she'd talk to store management and step up patrols. But telling felt like maybe I just paved the way for him to return, because the more I documented, the more he might choose to escalate. I didn't go back. Joel took over for me those nights and texted 3 evenings later. He asked where you were. He looked angry when I said you quit. That was it. That night I moved, 2 zip codes away, into a building with security and lights. I changed my schedule. I asked friends to walk me to my car. I learned safety isn't a right, it's a fence you build. These days, I still check rear-view mirrors. I pass 7-Elevens and look away. I brush it off, but the fear whispers, stay aware. They don't need to break in. They just need routine. I never saw him again. No arrests, no confrontation, just that presence. Calm, constant, delivered through repetition. It never hurt me. It only asked me to stand still long enough for something to happen. Threat doesn't always appear as violence, it often arrives as presence. Unwanted attention, lingering eyes, silent observation. Trust your instincts. Report what unsettles you. Routine can be a shield. But when it's broken in a way that whispers, not shouts, don't wait for proof. Act anyway. Your safety matters more than comfort. I never considered myself brave. I wasn't the type to tour haunted houses or chase sunset hikes. At 21, I just wanted a steady balance. Part-time nights at the 7-Eleven off Stone Avenue in Tucson, and mornings spent working toward my major at the University of Arizona. The job was easy, predictable, listening to the hum of freezers, restocking the coffee station, barking out small talk with regulars. Nights were quiet, but steady, and quiet was good. It was a Thursday when everything felt off. I'd just finished a midday class, statistics, bleary but manageable, and pulled into the store at 11:50 p.m. Dale, the assistant manager, drove away in his truck and waved when I got out. Inside, there was no flicker of movement, no one restocking shelves, no soft radio in the back room. I stepped into the store, greeted only by the fluorescent hum. "Hey, Dale," I called, pressing the button to open the door. No answer. I flicked on lights. Registers ready, coffee hot, fridges humming. But the back? Dark. Too dark for his usual pre-shift routine. I waited. 10 minutes passed. I checked the restroom. Empty. I checked the parking lot. Only mine and Dale's. My pulse picked up. I tried the store radios. Nothing. I swallowed tight. Then I noticed the security monitor looping, showing footage 30 minutes old, Dale entering the back storage corridor. But he never exited. The door clicked closed, but no further frames showed him. It repeated. I rewound. He stepped in at 11:20. Then nothing. I replayed it again. Blink, enter, fade. Room empty. My stomach plummeted. The storage hallway was silent, cold. More so than the rest of the store. I paused at the threshold. Boxes lined the shelves. Cereal, cleaning supplies, everything in its place, except the door to the deepest corner, which now looked slightly ajar. It never did that before. Heart pounding, I stepped in. The light switch flicked, but the bulbs overhead were half dead, buzzing. I moved along the shelves, each plastic box making my footsteps echo. No Dale, no radio noise, just hum of the freezer behind me, magnified. Then I saw it. Behind a stack of detergent, a trap door, a narrow square cement slide in the floorboard. My breath hitched. The store had no basement, not on old building plans, not to my knowledge. I flicked open the trap door slowly. A stale gust of cold air rushed up, damp metal, rust, soil. A narrow concrete stairway descended into darkness. A basement hallway. My phone flashlight flicked, revealing stairs worn, crumbling at the edges. Cold crept up my spine, but I whispered, "Dale, you here?" A faint metal clang answered, like a loose pipe hitting floor, or maybe footsteps. I froze. The store's hum seemed distant, replaced by my own breath. I wanted to run, but I couldn't. I needed to know if he was down there. I backed away, pressed the trapdoor shut, stood it upright again. With shaky hands, I placed boxes on top. My heart hammered. I fled back to the cashier station, my mouth dry. I called his phone, straight to voicemail. I rattled off, "Dale, call me." I opened the back again, locked it firmly, called the district manager at 12:05 a.m. She came out 30 minutes later, flashlight in hand. She didn't believe the basement. We lifted boxes, knocked at the floor. Nothing. No trapdoor. No chill. No footsteps. Dale never showed up that night. I managed the store through the midnight transition. Packs of Slurpee cups, coffee filters, store logs. I stared at the closed storage door for hours, expecting someone, or something, to step out. In daylight, I asked coworkers. Dale hadn't worked any shifts. He didn't answer his phone. My manager called off sick. I checked the security footage again. Dale entering the back room, and that was it. The rest was gone, erased. First that hour, later that entire day, now smooth and continuous. No interruptions, no cold hallway, just a normal log of boxes and deliveries. I reported it to the police. A missing persons case. They dusted the office but found nothing. No signs of forced entry, no suspicious contacts, just Dale gone and me left blinking. I quit that job midweek. The store reopened the next day with new night staff. Dale remained missing. Nobody mentioned basements. Time passed. I stayed in Tucson. I didn't rebuild. I dropped classes, changed roommate. The store on Stone Avenue reopened months later under different management. I drove past once on a wide Sunday midday, hoping for proof. A maintenance man told me there were only storage shelves, no basement, no trap door, nothing irregular in the plans. I couldn't go back. Every aisle, every hum felt marked. I haunted myself with what-ifs. Did Dale fall? Did someone hide him? Worse, did I look in the wrong place? I researched building permits. No subterranean expansions ever listed, just flat slabs and shelving. It didn't make sense, it couldn't. But the cold still followed me in memory. The damp stairway, the clang and dark silence after calling his name. It's been years. Dale was never found. The police closed the missing person case. No leads, no evidence. I moved to another state. I work a different job now, a library assistant. Quiet, safe. People speak through mailboxes, not monitors. But sometimes late at night, I wake and feel that chill around my ankles. I hear the echo of metal on concrete. Sometimes I wonder if that basement is still there, waiting for someone else to look. Maybe it's another empty basement. Maybe it's waiting. Sometimes what disappears isn't just a person. It's the truth you hesitate to uncover. Trust your instincts, even if no one else believes you. If something feels wrong, keep looking, because ignoring the unknown can cost you, and maybe someone else, the chance to stop it. They say the night has its own rhythm. By age 29, I was well tuned into that subtle beat. I'd worked graveyard shifts at the 7-Eleven off California Avenue in Bakersfield, right beside Highway 99, long enough to find comfort in the freezer hum and the flickering fluorescent lights. My name's Liam, and I didn't mind the silence. Most nights it felt like space to think, not get lost. That Thursday started like any other. I clocked in at midnight, brewed a fresh pot of coffee and refilled the cooler. The store folks were familiar, truckers yawning through their coffee runs, teens slumping in for energy drinks, cops swinging by for late shift donuts. But today, around 2:20 a.m., something felt different. I'd been reorganizing cleaning supplies when the bell above the door jingled. I instinctively looked over and saw her. A woman in a long coat, hair wild and tangled, stepped inside barefoot, arms folded, eyes distant. No purse, no phone. She didn't look homeless, just otherworldly. I greeted her. "Evening, ma'am. Anything I can help you with?" She didn't react. She simply walked slowly down aisle 4, where we kept cleaning products, and froze by the glass cleaner like she was balancing her breath, not choosing a spray bottle. I didn't follow. I kept working behind the counter, scanning rations of chips and slushy lids. Still, I kept glancing her way. She stayed there 10 minutes. 10 minutes of silence, broken only by soft humming lights and the occasional crackle from the Slurpee machine. Then she turned and left without buying a thing. I watched her through the window, tracking her to the dumpster where she paused and looked up at the flickering neon sign. She didn't hurry, didn't look around. Then she walked off into the darkness. I swallowed against the uneasy tightness behind my teeth and tried to resume normal. But when I passed the coffee station minutes later, there it was. A shopping cart stuffed full, chips, pastries, candy bars. Everything had been stocked by someone, but not me, not anyone on shift. I froze. I knew I hadn't left it there. The cart hadn't been in view when I stocked earlier. The store had been empty for nearly half an hour. No customers since the woman left. Yet here the cart was, fully stocked. I checked the cams. No footage, no one entering. No sign of her earlier. The monitor skipped from 2:19 to 2:22. I leaned in, heart pounding. It was like she, and that cart, never existed. The sound came next, soft at first, then sharper. Whispered words drifting from the back cooler area. "You forgot something." Faint, distant, barely above breath. I stopped stocking Slurpee lids and listened. Nothing after the first whisper. Then pause. Then again. "You forgot something." I swallowed hard. My throat closed tight. I thought it was electrical at first. Poor insulation, wires buzzing, but no. That whisper didn't hum. It spoke. From the back. I flicked off the cooler. The clatter of the plug hit the concrete floor. It echoed. The whisper died. Silence again. I stood nearly shaking. Disconnected cooler. Dead store. No cart. No woman. Just me. I sent a text to my manager before things spun further. Weird stuff. Cart appeared. Whispering voice behind cooler. No cam footage. You okay if I call tomorrow? No response. Her phone must have been silenced. I tried to reset the day, clean the bathroom, restock coffee cups, but the air felt denser, like I'd sculpted it differently, carved out a cold, strange pocket. Then, standing at the register after a brief rush of a delivery driver, I heard it. Click. The drawer side open, not full, empty. No transaction, no beep, just click. Years working this register, never seen that. I yanked it shut, heart pounding, radius narrowed. I told myself, push through until shift's end. I burned through inventory, scanned layaways, wiped the door frames. Nearly 3 hours to go, but the store wasn't just quiet. It was waiting. At about 4 a.m., I decided to step outside for air. I opened the door, but nothing happened. No motion sensor light, no sensor beep. The parking lot light tower held dark. I stood inside the frame, unlit, invisible. My reflection stared at me through the glass but didn't move when I did. It felt impossibly wrong. My breath stalled. Glass barrier separated me from my world, like looking at a mirror behind thick water. I pressed a hand flat on the glass. No condensation. Just, emptiness. Silence pressed in on me. I couldn't tell if I could hear cars passing. The street was quiet. Too quiet. No diesel throbs, no birds, just stillness. I realized the store had progressed through time. I hadn't seen any car count, checked any clock, but I knew dawn was creeping in, and I was running out of momentum. I retreated to the counter, needed to finish shift, needed to escape. I stubbed my phone's flashlight on under the register. My fingers shook as I checked delivery logs, entry times, cam playback. I found the jump. They cut the feed around 2:18 a.m. for a moment. No timestamp, no playback, just void. I closed the lid, swallowed hard, and kept working through shift. But every time I heard a hum or a shift behind me, I turned. The woman never returned, nor the cart, nor the whisper. The door still malfunctioned. The drawer still kicked open sometimes. I took notes, timestamps with shaky handwriting. Morning light began showing through. My shift ended at dawn. I went straight to the district manager's office and reviewed my notes. Cart dumped near coffee, whispering behind cooler, unexplained door problems. Drawer that opened itself. Motion sensor dead. Unresponsive camera feed. Silent store. She looked at me like I'd lost it. Liam, no one else saw anything, she said, voice sheepish. Sarah on the next shift might have reported hearing a door squeak. That's it. No cameras caught a person. No calls to police. People see things at night. I backed down, deflated. Trophies of sleep deprivation and doubt. I clocked out and drove away, promising myself to never return this shift. I left without even collecting my last paycheck. I was done. A week later, I got a DM on Instagram from Sarah, another employee on Graveyard. She said she'd seen the barefoot woman, heard whispers, watched the card appear, and had snapped a pic. The image was blurry, dreamlike, static fuzz at the woman's face. A void, not flesh. She asked me to confirm if I recognized it. I didn't. But I believed her. I left Bakersfield soon after, finding work in another region, another store, another loop of hum and floor tiles. But that night stays in me. I avoid late shifts, scanning store aisles with wary eyes. I glance at motion sensor lights before stepping through doors. I listen for whispers behind coolers during silence. And every time I see a cart near a coffee station late at night, I pause. It wasn't about the woman. It was about what she represented. An intrusion that obeyed no logic. A presence that existed but couldn't be captured by camera, charted by log, or described to authority. It was a reminder that places we think we control, through routine, through daylight, through protocols, can still be inhabited by shadows. I still wonder who or what she was. An echo of someone who needed to be remembered? A spirit of error? A glitch in reality? I don't know, but I know I heard that whisper. I know I saw that cart materialize. And I know that face-down drawer. I don't look for answers because some questions aren't meant to be answered. Some nights are meant to teach. Sometimes the greatest threat isn't violence. It's the inexplicable presence in familiar places. Trust what unsettles you, even if no one else can explain it. Some warnings aren't clear, but if something feels wrong, step away. Your peace matters more than proving what can't be proven. I never anticipated getting unsettled working at a 7-Eleven, let alone by someone who seemed so ordinary. My name's Tara, I'm 31, freshly divorced, and living in a tiny studio apartment just blocks from the convenience store on Blue Ridge Boulevard in Kansas City. I picked up the evening shift to fill the quiet hours. Work paid the bills, stock kept my hands busy, and the surrounding neighborhood, lined with shuttered thrift shops and empty storefronts, was peaceful at dusk. It was a mild Monday evening when he first appeared. I'd just finished restocking the coffee station and wiping the counter when the bell chimed. He stepped in, dripping from the light rain, wearing a vintage Kansas City Royals jacket that looked lived in. Faded patches, frayed edges. He wasn't young, maybe in his early 40s, average build, looking entirely like any guy you might pass by on the street at twilight. He grabbed a Gatorade. That's it. No phone out, no earbuds, no hesitation. When I scanned it through, he paid, and for a moment our eyes met. "You've got the kind of face people remember," he said softly, voice even. Then, "Hope you don't disappear." I flushed. I laughed it off. Worked the street-smart line about stocking more coffee and keeping busy. But inside, that phrase settled like grit in my throat. He smiled, a quiet half-smile, and slipped out into the rain. I stood wiping my hands clean, staring at the door like my reflection held the answer. My gut felt off kilter in a way I couldn't ignore. I shook it off, focused on my shift, but knew something had changed. Over the next week, I kept seeing him. Every few nights, always under his jacket, always quiet. He appeared randomly, sometimes early evening, sometimes late, staying just long enough to send my heart into my throat. Some nights he walked in, browsed the aisles, left without buying anything. Other nights he never stepped inside, just stood across the street under the bus stop awning, rain dripping from its roof as he stared at the sliding glass doors of the store. I told my coworker, Joel. He shrugged. "He's like a quiet creep," I grumbled behind the snack racks one afternoon. He didn't know what else to say. There'd been no disruptive behavior, no threats, just presence. When I mentioned it to my manager, he joked, "You're lucky. I never get notes like this, just complaints about pricing." But the day he said it, I arrived to find a folded note tucked under the front door. "I know where you park." No name, no envelope, just ink on paper. My chest grew tight. Hands shaking, I opened the door and stuffed it into my pocket, voicing a shaky thanks to my coworker as he unlocked it. That night, the moment I slipped into my car, I realized someone had already wiped my windshield clean. Not just water, dust gone, streaks polished away, wiped until I could see my reflection. Sitting alone in the rain, steering wheel between my palms, I texted Sam, my coworker, asking him if he saw anyone by my car. He didn't. He sent hoodie-clad silhouettes home, watched me drive off. The next night I called the police and filed a report. I told them about the note, the jacket, the disappearances. They listened, asked questions, took notes, but said without video footage or threats there wasn't much they could do. When I got to work, I bristled each time the bell jingled. It jingled again. He'd arrived. This time he walked in, pulling the jacket tighter around him. Sam glanced at him, then me. The man browsed. He held a candy bar, walked to the counter. My heart raced. "This is..." I started, voice shaking. He laid the candy down, looked into my eyes. "You're always here," he said, a line that felt both true and predatory. He paid and left. I sank against the cooler wall, knees shaking. My shift ended early. I left, asking Sam to walk me to my car. Great. Here's the continuation of Quiet Admirer, chapters 4 and 5, each around 600 words, followed by the moral lesson at the end. The next night I didn't drive. I got a ride from Sam and told him I wasn't walking into that parking lot alone. We joked about it, sort of. The kind of laugh you force to keep your voice from cracking. He stayed close to me when we entered the store, but by mid-shift he clocked out, giving me a half smile and a "text me if anything weird happens." That night felt still, unusually still. A dull drizzle tapped against the windows and traffic on Blue Ridge was thin. At 9:30 I noticed headlights in the lot. A sedan, dark blue or maybe black, idling with no one stepping out. I told myself it wasn't him. Could have been anybody. But the jacket, that jacket, was unmistakable when the driver's side door finally opened. He didn't walk in right away. He just stood by his car, hands in his pockets, watching the building like he was deciding whether to go inside or not. I held my breath behind the counter, pretending to count bills in the drawer, like staying busy might make me invisible. Eventually, he walked away down the sidewalk. Not toward the store. Away from it. I watched him pass under the parking lot lights, head down, disappearing behind the closed thrift shop on the corner. It felt like exhaling after being underwater. I shook my head, rolled my shoulders, poured myself a coffee I didn't want just to do something with my hands. But then I looked at the window again. The sedan was gone. I didn't hear it leave. And as I turned to head to the stockroom for more cups, I froze. Sitting on the floor by the back entrance tucked into the edge of the bread display was a single Polaroid photo. My hands went cold before I even picked it up. It was a photo of me. Behind the register. Same uniform, same necklace I'd just started wearing again. Same face, same fear. And it wasn't from tonight. It had to be from a few days ago. Because I remembered wearing my hair up like that, and I hadn't since Monday. I dropped the photo. I locked the front door. I called the manager, then Sam. I don't even remember what I said. Something about being done. That I was done. I left the store lights on. I didn't clock out. Sam picked me up 15 minutes later. I never went back. 2 weeks passed. I moved in with my cousin in Independence. I changed my number, deleted all public posts off social media, even the ones from college. I didn't want anyone to know where I was or how to find me. My manager texted me once asking if I planned to return. I never answered. Then, a month later, I was walking through a strip mall in St. Louis, clear across the state. I'd been out grabbing detergent and looking for a cheap pair of boots. It was evening, nearly sunset. I passed a laundromat with fogged windows and flickering signage. And that's when I saw him, sitting on a bench, flipping through a newspaper. Same build, same slouch. And on the arm of his Royals jacket, now clearer in daylight, was something new stitched into the sleeve. 7-Eleven, Blue Ridge Bale VD. I kept walking. I didn't run. I didn't look back. But I've never forgotten that jacket. Never stopped wondering whether I'd ever really left. Whether he's still out there watching convenience stores, looking for someone new. Someone just like me. Now, when I stop at gas stations or drugstores, I check the windows. I check the reflections. I watch the people who stand too still for too long. Because I know what kind of face some people remember. And I know how quietly some predators wait. They don't break in. They learn your shift. They learn your habits. They wait for you to drop your guard. And then they leave just enough fear to make you wonder if it was all in your head. Sometimes danger doesn't announce itself with screaming or violence. It arrives slowly, quietly, dressed in normalcy. The scariest predators aren't the ones who act. They're the ones who wait. Pay attention to your instincts. Speak up. Set boundaries early and often. Because safety isn't just about reacting to what's done to you, it's recognizing when something doesn't feel right, even if it hasn't happened yet. Not all red flags wave. Some just linger.